Hello, my name is Bob, and I'll be your preacher this morning. Now, I know what you're saying. He's not a preacher, he's a lawyer. He never went to seminary, he's certainly not a theologian, and I bet he's never even read the Bible all the way through. And my friends, those things are true. So why am I here? That is a fair question. I have the answer to that question. And the answer is I got an email. And I was sitting at my desk. I was about 2:30 on a Tuesday afternoon and minding my own business. And this email came in. And the email came from someone you know pretty well. And as a matter of fact, this person is in this room at this very minute. And I remember how it began. It had a wonderful beginning. Bob, I'm going to ask you for something special, and I'm hoping you say yes and smile deeply. So obviously I said yes because here I am, and I'm saying yes for two reasons. The first has to do with the answer to today's question. Now, Lyndon Johnson was a very persuasive fellow, and when he asked somebody to do something, they generally did it. Robert Caro said, for example, that Earl Warren really didn't want to head the commission that investigated the assassination of John Kennedy, but Lyndon Johnson talked to him, and the rest is history. Pat DeYoung is a very persuasive person, and when she asks somebody to do something, they generally do it. That's the first reason. But it's not the only reason. And it's not even the most important reason. As I was in my office reflecting on Pat's request, it occurred to me, I'm not a preacher, but I am a father. And I've been a father for 31 years. And I was a son, too, much shorter time, 11 years. And I thought, this might be a good way to honor the memory of my father, particularly since this August will be the 100th anniversary of his birth. So I sent Pat this email. I don't know if people can read it. Sure, I'll do so in honor of my dear father, whose name I bear and who passed away on June 13, 1959. August 13 will be the 100th anniversary of his birth, thanks to the invitation. And I added a P.S. The last time I preached, at least in a church, was in 1966 at Bethel Church in Evansville, Indiana, scant 47 years ago. And there is what I looked like in 1966. All right, so now I'm here. You know why I'm here. What are we going to do next? The title of my sermon is Our Father, Magic Moments and Lessons Learned. So it's going to be a two-part talk. First, I'm going to talk about two what I call magic moments, for me being a son, and then I'm going to talk about lessons learned. Now, what is a magic moment? In my mind, it has three characteristics. First, it has to be something that's important. Second, it has to be something that you think about, not every day, but it keeps coming up in your mind. You think about it as time goes on. And it has to be a moment where time slowed down. So here's the first magic moment. First, this occurred on June 13, 1959. How many people were alive on June 13, 1959? You can't read this very well, so I'll read it for you, and I have to read it, otherwise I'm not going to get through it. I don't see God often, but I do remember one time, more than 45 years ago. It was June 13, 1959, just after supper on a warm Midwestern evening. I'm 11 years old, playing baseball in the big yard behind my house on Mulberry Street in Evansville, Indiana. School was out for the summer, and the living was easy, even idyllic. But my father was very ill. When I saw God was when my mother walked out into the yard, which she very seldom did, to pick flowers. Time slowed down, finally stopped, and I asked, "Is Daddy going to die?" Slowly she nodded yes, saying nothing. Her face had the most calm, accepting, radiant look I'd ever seen. A gentle smile showing great, deep sadness, yet great peace. The moment passed, as did my kind and loving father later that night. But that memory remains among my most cherished, and it comforts and centers me all these years later. God, who speaks still, was certainly speaking then, left brain and all, I have no doubts. All right, the second magic moment took place during the time period March-June 2006. Who was alive on during that time period? And I call this a tale of two emails. Again, I was sitting at my desk, and I just finished reading a Team of Rivals. And it occurred to me, having read the book, that my image of Abraham Lincoln is very much like my image of Jesus. Gentleness, magnanimity, warmth, compassion, empathy, and those wonderful traits. Although I did note in this email to Pat that, as far as I know, Lincoln had a quality that I never heard attributed to Jesus, and that's a good sense of humor. So one thing led to another, and some of you may remember that the Adult Education Committee put on a program that I led called, was Abraham Lincoln a Progressive Christian? And I talked about Lincoln's religious beliefs and his humor, but that's not the story. The story is, on June 13th, again the anniversary of my father's death, I went back and I read the last letter he wrote about 2 weeks before he died. And I sent Pat another email. Dear Pat, welcome back. Meanwhile, given your interest in the subject, I thought I'd share another synchronistic moment. I've attached a letter my father Robert wrote to my sister Susan on May 7, 1959, just over a month before he died. I've read the letter many times, but only this morning was I struck by the last paragraph on the first page. There, my dear father noted that he was planning to give a talk on Lincoln with touches of his humor and his religious beliefs. We came together somehow, some way. That's a magic moment. Okay, part two. Lessons learned. What have we learned from our fathers? So I went to two really good sources. I mean, who could be wiser than former moderators, right? And who could be wiser than my own wonderful kids? So first, we're going to deal with the moderators. Whoops. So I wrote a lot of moderators the following email. It's a beautiful day. Pat asked me to give a talk on Father's Day. I'd like to include answers by former moderators to the question, one thing I learned from my father was. And here we go. We'll go through these pretty quickly. Is Dorothy here? Okay, Dorothy Clemens. My dad was Max Thielen, 1880 to 1971, a very prominent San Francisco lawyer. From him, I learned to appreciate the difference between laws and justice. I also learned the absolute necessity of immediately putting names and dates on the backs of photographs. Cal Case. One thing that I learned from my father is best demonstrated by two examples. Before you try to repair or fix a non-working electrical appliance of any sort, make sure that it's plugged in. And if that doesn't work, beat on it a while, and if that doesn't work, call an electrician. If a water faucet anywhere in your property is dripping and does not fully stop the water, shut off the water at the valve between the leak and the meter. With proper tools, take the valve apart. It is entirely possible that the 38-year-old washer has finally given up the ghost. Father taught by example. It may be a choice to fix it or skip it, or to skip a TV football game and have a silent dinner with a ticked-off wife. And then he ended with a slightly more thoughtful comment, and that was, service to others comes first. Louis Perry, is he here? My parents' house was well provided with books, and many volumes were from my grandparents' house. There were reference books and dictionaries, so here's my story. When I was a boy, I did much reading, including 19th century novels. The first time I encountered the word prostitute, I asked my father what it meant. My younger sister was in the room, and so my dad said, "Look it up in the dictionary." I have been using the dictionary ever since. Randy Summers. Randy is here. Randy, you here? One thing I learned from my father was meeting with disaster. He would say, "How bad is it? Will we remember it 10 years from today? And even if we do, what will we say about it then?" Terry Jackson. Terry's here somewhere. Hi, Terry. My recollections of my father center on California dreamin', not the Beach Boys kind, but it comes from when his family came out to California in the early 20s in an open roadster. The pictures of the car itself amazed me because during my first 10 years living in Winnipeg, no one in our extended family even had a car. So my dad spent some 20 years or so dreaming about California until he managed to get our family of three to San Diego in 1946. What a change from Winnipeg. Grandfather Isaac disowned him initially for leaving, but eventually came around. So what I learned from my dad was how important it is to have a dream. Bruce Danglin. Bruce? This is really good advice. One thing I learned from my father was how to slice a banana into your cereal without making a mess. Peel the top half, support the banana in your hand on top of one of the peels, and with a knife or spoon, cut through the banana, stopping at the peel. Let the slices fall directly into your cereal, and don't discard the peel until you're done with it. Janet McDonald, and both Janet and her father are here. The year I was 14, my parents gave me a dictionary for Christmas. We're back to dictionaries. Inside the front cover, in addition to my name, date, and from mother and father, my father had also inscribed, "In case someone asks, what's the good word?" An asterisk directed me to the bottom of the page where he had written, "See pages 868 to 869. Of course, I immediately opened the dictionary and found that the word spanning pages 868 and 869 was love. Barbara Adicott, is she here by any chance? One thing I learned from my father was that he bestowed upon my brother and I absolute unconditional love. He was a genuinely gentle and kindly man who always had great respect for others. Bob Hellison, I know he's here. My father told me that if you can't say something nice about someone, don't say anything at all. Carmel Knudsen, there she is. There were two things I remember my father saying that have helped me stayed with me and helped me often. Both of them are great. Boredom is a result of a lack of creativity, and happiness is a choice. The first one was when I was a teenager, and the second one happened when I asked if he was happy in his continuing care facility. He followed up with, "Why on earth would I choose to be unhappy?" Boyard Rowe. Boyard, are you here? There he is. One thing I learned from my father was how to be a church person. I learned about the give and take of a faith community, about how to be nurtured by that community as well as how to be a contributing member. My father had been a Methodist and congregational minister and was a progressive Protestant Christian before there was a UCC. Mo Wright. I don't know if Mo's here today. My father's favorite refrain was, "What are you going to do when I'm not around?" My siblings and I did not interpret this statement as a premonition of his untimely demise. He turned 88 this May, but rather a challenge to our ability to be independent and think for ourselves. I eventually took his advice by leaving home at an early age and not asking for his opinion very often. There we go. Henry Snyder, I don't think Henry's here. My father was a model of kindness, sympathy, patience, empathy, and considerateness. If teaching by example counts, that would be his greatest lesson, though I'm not sure I was or am his best student. I do remember how he taught us to drive in the mountains in the days when the roads were not so great. It was again a reflection of his patience, empathy, and considerateness. Carol Ingram. My dad, you're really going to like this one. My dad taught me what he also learned from his father, that we should live our lives in service to others. When he was 89, he fell and hit his head, which led to a decline in health, confusion, and ultimately to his death. A hospice nurse came to visit him and carefully explained how hospice worked. And as he listened quietly, he paid much attention when he was listening on his bed. When she finished, she asked if he had any questions. He got up on one elbow and said, "Well, I think I could help out a couple of days a week." That was Dad. Diana Graham. One thing I learned from my father is that it's fun to volunteer. I always wondered what he would do when he retired because he really didn't have any hobbies. My mother had always done volunteer work, so when he retired, he joined her at the Red Cross mobile blood drives and had his own projects like driving older guys to meetings or appointments. He really enjoyed doing things for others. Charles Taylor. Charles is here. There's Charles. Dads are almost inseparable from teachers. They are role models, imparters of guidance, people who set examples, both good and bad, and teachers who clarify and enhance messages from school, church, and life experiences. One lesson I recall was when Dad took my older brother and me on a camping trip in the mountains of Virginia. I was about 8 or 9, my brother was 10 or 11. We were new to the experience of sleeping outdoors at night, and we had a lot of questions. It was also a rare experience to be off without Mother. We were hiking and talking about the wilderness and our future careers. Dad had said it didn't matter what career we decided on, but the most important thing was to follow our interests and do the job to the best of our ability. Images of saving lives, winning cases or games seemed to me much more vivid. 55 years later, though, I realized that what he said was much more important because it left me with many choices and also provided an undergirding for any choice I made. Dad died 19 years ago, and I will miss him. He taught me many things, some things to do and others not to do. I am grateful for both and for his love in my life. Bonnie Hester. Bonnie? One thing I learned from my father was how important it is to love your work. He grew up with a father who was not happy at his job. A scholarship, perseverance, and much effort enabled my father to follow his dream and find a calling. I grew up seeing him deeply engaged. He encouraged his children to do the same. Laszlo Bunnier. Laszlo's here. It's right there. I learned from my father that although there is only one creator, and he is the God for all peoples on earth, regardless of what religion they subscribe to, and consequently, to respect all religions and belief systems as long as they don't promote evil. He taught me that we affirm our belief in God through the kind of lives we live. I think it's a wonderful phrase. I admired his deep ethical and moral convictions and his belief in fairness to the fault in all his dealings with other people. I learned from him that every person has an interesting life. And if I have a sincere interest in exploring, I will hear and learn amazing things from and about all people. Janet Eady. Janet? There she is. Good. This is great. My father taught me 4 things: how to ride a bike, how to make pancakes, not to dilly-dally when taking a photograph, and more importantly, the gift of gentle patience. Milton Fuji. Milton's here, he's back there. One thing I learned from my father was to waste nothing. Long before the era of environmental awareness, he lived by the creed of reduce, reuse, recycle. He brought home discarded nails and bits of wire from construction sites and regularly rescued items from landfill. When he died, he left behind chests full of salvaged mechanical and electrical parts and hardware that I'm still finding useful 22 years later. Scott's 40. Scott and I have something in common. My dad died when I was 15. He was supportive and heavily involved in my extracurricular activities, but I don't know what any 15-year-old knows. I don't know that any 15-year-old knows his father well. I regret that we didn't have the opportunity to know each other as I matured into adulthood. My fondest memories are the times when my mom and sister would be away on a Saturday morning, and he'd crank up Willie Nelson on the stereo and make pancakes. Anytime I hear Whiskey River, I'm reminded of sunlight shafting through the windows and the smell of burned butter. My grandfather was definitely my strongest fatherly influence, and he would be consulted frequently for things like household repairs. I replaced the heating element in the family dryer with coaching from him over the phone. Years later, we took a trip to the snowy woods of the Upper Peninsula, and our snowmobile broke down a few miles from our cabin. We hiked in with the rest of the family and gear, then hiked back with a flashlight and tools to make repairs. We froze our fingers and we swore a little, but it got it going. From him I learned the importance of doing whatever it takes to put family first, not giving up even when it's cold and dark, and knowing that patience and two hands can get almost anything done. All right, part two, lessons learned, passing the moderators. We're now into my three kids. And I sent them this email, which I'll read briefly. Greetings, I need advice. I'm going right to the top to my three wonderful daughters. In June, I'll be giving a talk at SCCB about fatherhood. I'd like to include observations by each of you. So I'd invite you to provide a short answer to this question. If I have children, I'll tell them that one thing I learned from my dad was, and my oldest daughter, I'd invite to the stage, Emily Asher.
I had a hard time deciding what I wanted to say, and so I came up with a three-way tie. Okay, can you guys hear me, I hope? So I said that I had a hard time deciding, so I came up with three things, and I thought it was a tie among them. So the first was, this too shall pass. Thank you. Thank you. This too shall pass. The second was sound mind, sound body, and spirit. And the last is the key to getting through graduate school, which is milk duds last forever.
Thank you, dear. Thank you, dear. Thank you. Okay, number two. This is my daughter, Allison Stumpf, and she's going to be married 2 weeks from yesterday.
If I have children, I'll tell them one thing I learned from my dad is to be kind. It really is as simple as that. My dad is an incredibly kind person and always encourages acts of kindness and understanding in every situation with all people. It doesn't always have to be a grand gesture. Even the small acts of kindness, even the acts that no one notices, have the power to change someone's day for the better. I know that when I'm teaching my children to be good and kind people, I'll be able to point to my dad as the perfect example.
Thank you. Okay, last but not least, my youngest, Claire Elizabeth Stumpf. She is in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and if the gods are with us, if God is with us, and the technology is with us, we'll see her. It could take a minute or so be patient. So be patient.
Um, One thing I learned from my dad was how to be open-minded and still maintain conviction. Experiencing my father, who is the smartest person I know, humbly acknowledge his mistaken viewpoints or opinions, and still uphold his soft-spoken pride showed me that it's okay to be wrong. I will always love asking dinner guests to complete the sentence, "I used to think this, but now I think that." Even more admirable is his ability to have a flexible mind that never rests on its laurels and is always searching for a higher truth. Love you, Dad. A mind that never rests on its laurels and is always
So, we're almost at the end. And I began thinking, when I think of fatherhood, what do I really think about? It's many things, obviously. But I think, for whatever reasons, the concept of father as protector really resonates with me. My father, unfortunately, wasn't able to protect me in that same way. And I'm so grateful that I'm here. My 3 wonderful daughters have made it. I've been able to protect them, keep them safe. But now there's a different challenge. I also asked them to answer another question, and that was, I love my father, but if I could change one thing about him, what would it be? And we're not going to belabor this, but I'll just read 2 short excerpts. I appreciate his ability to protect my sisters and me, but I wish he'd be more vulnerable. I'm grateful for his sacrifices to protect our family, and I would hope that he can begin to let his guard down and let us know his softer side. So that's part of this talk. This is what I'm doing. I'm kind of letting my guard down. And I would invite you to join me in the Lord's Prayer, and perhaps on this one day, instead of using the more inclusive language, our Creator, maybe we could just one time say, Our Father, as a group. So please join me. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Thank you.